Hello, my name is Ines Yang, and today I will be talking about the modernist architect Li Chen-Kuen. These are two pictures of his work, both interior and exterior, and they contain a lot of very interesting natural organic shapes, which have been influenced by his multicultural background, not only in China, but also in Germany as well. And so we'll be delving into that in his personal life. So Li Chen-Kuen was born in Zhejiang, China, which is a coastal city, and went to Germany around 15 years old to study architecture. And this is where he was heavily influenced by the new building movement, such as kind of the Bauhaus, what it represents. And we kind of see how he merges these two ideas into a new form. And he even creates this idea of the Chinese work bund in contrast to the German work bund of the time. And so we can kind of see that Chen-Kuen Li, he didn't fit into one category or the other. A lot of times I think we tend to think about global modernism as European modernism and Indian modernism, but we often forget that a lot of people don't cleanly fall into these categories. So how does Chen-Kuen Li take the natural traditional architecture in China and marry it to these new concepts that he's learned in Germany, such as the new building movement? And so some of Li's influences was Hans Scharoun, who was his mentor and created the Berliner Philharmonie, which you can see kind of contrasts his own buildings, which you can very see takes inspiration from these very crystalline shapes. And so Li really his style is Eastern philosophy meets European modernism. He has a lot of very organic architecture that you can see here. And as a member of the avant-garde in the German post-war architecture, he drew on a lot of these new building movement concepts, but he marries it to his very traditional Chinese background, which we'll see in the first work, the Hausstraub Senior. And so this is the exterior of the building. As you can see, very similar to Asian architecture, he maintains a lot of the building materials in their natural form. And so as you can see, the heavy stone base and the wooden roof that kind of still has the textural qualities, kind of the wooden kind of striated lines that wood creates, that kind of is still there. That's very similar to Japanese architecture, actually. And so this is a picture of the interior of the house. As you can see, he really, right as you kind of enter, there's this almost garden in the middle of the house. And he even has an interior pool inside the house. And I think this is very similar to Chinese architecture, which uses Chinese landscapes, which use a lot of pools and ponds to kind of create this sense of Zen, and he uses that in this pool as well. And we'll see more water motifs in his work as well. And so the second house is the Dr. Gillier. And so right as you step in the house, you see this giant tree planted in the middle of the house. And this kind of emphasizes his Eastern philosophy of nature as the central element, and everything else in life kind of spirals outwards into these different branches of the tree. And so he really likes this idea of nature as the center, which we see here. And so another thing I really wanted to point out was that the lived experience of this house looks very different than the staged setup of the house, as you can see in this picture. Stephen Gillier actually lived in this house, and I think he ended up actually selling the house, which I thought was very interesting. As a house that was kind of supposed to celebrate nature, I wonder if the practical kind of functional use of the house kind of wasn't necessarily there. I think very similar to modernism is portrayed as minimal functional architecture, but in reality modernist architecture was really more about aesthetic than functionality. And so I wonder how livable are these spaces? Yes, Li's ideas and intentions are very much of living in a garden. As we can see on the left, it looks very nice, but it almost seems more as a living work of art rather than kind of a space that we can actually live in. I think Lee also dealt with the challenges that modernist architecture presents. And so what happens when you're wearing socks inside the house and accidentally step in soil that has just been washed, that has just been watered. And so I think even though Lee wanted to kind of incorporate these ideas, maybe it wasn't as functional as it could have been, like how modernist architecture is. And so lastly, I just wanted to show a central picture of the outside of the house, and it very much kind of resembles the Chinese gardens of the time, where you have kind of your natural landscape almost hiding the house in the background. And so lastly, I wanted to talk about the house caterer. And so this is just the exterior of the house. As you can see in here, he also uses a heavy natural stone base. And this is the interior of the home. As you can see through the large glass door outside, you see kind of a nice big pond outside. And I think this is very kind of pays homage to his neighborhood growing up. Since he lived in a coastal city, he was right outside of his home. He was kind of surrounded by water. And I think there was this kind of calming, irresistible quality about it that he might have liked and he wanted to implement in his own work as well. And I think we see that this water motif in a lot of his work, where he likes to incorporate this Chinese landscape that he grew up in, and kind of he wants the person he's building the home for to kind of feel that feeling as well. And so these are just a couple more pictures of his interior of the house. And as you can see, he uses a lot of wood. And so lastly, I just wanted to reflect on Lee's impact as a whole, as a intersection between Chinese architecture, Chinese landscapes, and German modernist architecture. It really is a balancing act achieved. He came from a non-traditional background of, being Chinese, and when he came to Germany, he kind of merged those two ideas in a very elaborate and beautiful way. And so I think it's really important to talk about non-European architects, because he created so many very interesting buildings that kind of is a product of his multicultural background. That's the end. Thank you very much.